to spend a few minutes on the role of the global advocate community in research, clinical trials, funding, design, accrual. I am a 5-time cancer survivor. Some of you don't know that. We all know, so you may be hearing that for the first time. And in all of my cancer experiences, never once have I not turned to European data. Every single time I've been diagnosed with one of my cancers, the influence of global research was incredibly important to me. And sometimes I think in the United States, patients tend to think everything happens here, and without fully appreciating the global nature of research and how we as patients and advocates must look at data on a global level. And so maybe you can address, just in brief, some of these issues.
Trials are good, support them, ain't no maybes about it. And global trials are better. Why? Our colleagues from Japan who are here, the Japanese cancer scientific class have made an incredibly important series of observations in treatment of lung cancer. So this is us in a way celebrating our genetic differences, and by understanding how different populations of patients respond to cancer drugs, then it gives us insights into how those drugs work, how we can refine them, how we can tailor them to the right population of patients. And that can only happen if we're doing trials across the global village. And as I say, there's just fantastic work, science coming from Japan in the treatment of lung cancer that's made an enormous difference. As advocates, again, let me set you another challenge when you go from here. If we look at the number of cancer patients in the United States who are in clinical trials, it'll be 2 or 3%. It won't be more than that. That is an that's an absurdity for a nation of this size, of its scientific complexity, of its standing, that large swathes of patients are hugely underrepresented in clinical trials. We had the same pictures in the United Kingdom, but with concerted effort, with work coming from patient advocates, with funding coming from government. 15% of cancer patients are now entering clinical trials, 5 to 6 times the number in the United States. I would set yourself a target. I would set your cooperative groups. I would set the National Cancer Institute. I'd set Harold Varmus a target of raising the number of patients into clinical trials. Why is that important? The larger the trials, the more robust, the better we understand the quality, the better the sort of results coming out of it. The more we reflect the community of patients that we're looking after and treating, the more quickly trials are done, the more agents we can look at, costs come down, quality comes up. So again, it's an issue for you as advocates. I'd have some fun, and somebody else should write a letter to Harold Varmus saying, we want to have a target of 10% of cancer patients into clinical trials within the next decade. So think rules of 10 and do something with that.
One of the things that I think is challenging for us in the US is our systems. Just the way that our healthcare system is set up. Unfortunately, clinical trials are not incentivized with people being treated in the community. And I think that there are other countries that do it better for a variety of reasons. The other issue that we have in the States is that we have the good fortune of having generally, which is not across the board, but generally relatively good access to care, which when you're talking about a developing country, oftentimes the only way for them to get quality care is in a clinical trial. So we have some different challenges in the US than we do in other countries, which it kind of gets back to our earlier discussion as advocates, is that we have to understand that there are certain things that we have to concentrate on here, whereas in other countries there may be other issues that are much more prominent. Sure. And where we have opportunities to come together, we should, but sometimes we can't come together because the issues are simply different.
So that's a very clear statement, and it's explanatory, but you're not defending it. Presumably you would
Absolutely
rather
not.
see exactly. So we'd rather this notion: trials are good, quality up, costs down, and anything that we can do, either in a legislative sense, in a funding sense, but as advocates, has got to be better for the patient community that we treat. There is some evidence to suggest that patients who are entered in trials, particularly in leukemia, do better than those who are not. And it's to do with protocols and quality of care. So there is a less than altruistic reason why patients should get enrolled in trials. other than looking for the future, other than looking for cohorts of cancer patients yet to come, it does look as if care in trials is rather good, possibly because they're good centres and various things like that.
I think that advocacy groups play an integral role when we're discussing treatment at a global level. And this is an issue that we've addressed at the IMF and we've noticed to be a problem. And so what we did is put together a group of the top experts in our field in multiple myeloma. They meet twice a year at a minimum and discuss things in between, but to share information, to discuss clinical trial design. They've published multiple papers, and I think that it's a really good model to get the global community talking about this, and especially from the physician's perspective. I mean, to be able to share information from a multitude of countries is really imperative if we're talking about moving forward and coming up with the next treatment or the next phase of treatment for patients to survive longer from a global perspective. So I think as advocacy groups, we play a very integral role in that because we're kind of the only ones that can do it, to pull all of these people together. We're all trying to achieve the same goals.
So I think two really, really important points coming out of that. One is the idea that knowledge is power. The more we share, the better the standards. And it's about, Francis Bacon was a member of the King Henry VIII's court, and he said, scientia potestas nam est. Knowledge is power, meaning keep it to yourself, husband it away and use it as a weapon. We're the opposite, sharing knowledge really counts. And of course, meetings like this, the ESMO meetings, are where we come together to do exactly that. But the second point, I've no doubt that in terms of intelligent trial design, involving patients, advocates as part of the trial design group, does improve quality. It improves the quality of the patient information sheets, the trial design, and in our settings at home and in many European countries, we have patients at the heart of all our trials design groups, and they're better, there's no doubt. Recruitment's better, we finish them much more quickly, quality's improved by having patients really, really at the heart of all the design stuff.
I think as patient advocates, we can do a great job in promoting clinical trials and the importance and explaining how it works. But what I am seeing through the patients who are calling our hotline is that they're only hearing about clinical trials further down the road. Maybe if they have a metastatic or recurrence, but not in the beginning of their diagnosis. And so the doctors and the physician's office don't seem to be telling about clinical trials at that point. Yep. And that seems like that would make a big difference as well.
Two very important points. Using patient groups, advocacy groups to promote trials on website is fantastic, so that we're having, because every patient who enters a trial does it as a volunteer, the partnership thing again. So good point, and couldn't agree more, and it definitely works. And I guess what you're saying is trials across the spectrum of disease, and I guess that's the point about, and it is funding, more trials, better access, etc., 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 coming in the back of that, but the point's well made.
Kim Ryan, I'm Director of Patient Information for Fight Colorectal Cancer. And just to your point about having links on our websites to clinical trials, I think that once a patient's gotten there, like we've got them, they're already considering a clinical trial. So I think we have to walk the cat back, and we have to do better at educating patients about what a clinical trial is, what their options are, when they can get in it, when they can get out of it, more just education around what things about a clinical trial, because we, like on our website, we can link to certain trials, or patients can search for any trials that they want, but in our opinion, once they've gotten there, we've gotten them. Those aren't the patients that we're worried about. There are people already considering a clinical trial, but we have to get the ones that aren't being given a clinical trial as a treatment option right when they're first diagnosed.
So I think that's a great point. And again, what you've made is it's a sort of set of generic statements, if you like, that are common to every of the disease groups here. What are trials about? Why are they of benefits? How do they improve the quality of cancer care generally? And again, that's something about, if you've got a forum for coming together, that's a message for all cancer patients. It could be generalised in that way. Then, as you say, you go down your shortcuts to specific routes and specific trials and so on.
I would encourage you since this is an ongoing initiative now, we're taking this on the road. We're doing more and more AIAs, not only in the US, but in Europe. One of the ideas that we've had was to hold some kind of communications, basically a summit, for the advocates from the US and in Europe to sit down at a round table and begin to hash out these issues and try to form some kind of a cohesive entity that we can partner on a global level. One, I want to thank all of you, and really this panel, because this could not be done without the expertise of individuals who are extremely well-versed. I hope you have a very successful rest of your ASCO meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Selma.